In a quiet, humble town, 17-year-old Amarachi stood out, not because of her silence but because of the deep scar stretching from her forehead to her cheek. After a childhood accident, she wore an eye patch to hide it, though no patch could ever hide her pain. Despite her father's loving reminders that beauty is in the heart, the world around her only saw the flaw on her face. Her father, a kind-hearted mechanic with worn hands, remained her constant comfort. He reminded her daily that her worth wasn't skin-deep. Though Amarachi tried to carry that wisdom into school, the world wasn't as kind. What she faced wasn't just curiosity, it was cruelty. At school, the bullying was relentless. Children whispered behind her back, made cruel jokes, and pointed at her scar. The worst came from William, the rich, sharp-tongued son of the town's wealthiest store owner. He mocked her relentlessly, turning her pain into public spectacle. Despite it all, Amarachi never lashed out. She kept her head slightly bowed in the school halls, bearing each insult with quiet strength. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. But deep within her, something stronger than anger was brewing. Amarachi wasn't just enduring, she was evolving. Beneath the surface, a quiet fire was growing, not hatred, but defiance, a belief that someday she would be seen, not as broken but as brave. That strength would come to light far sooner than she imagined. Amarachi, a 17-year-old black high school student with a visible facial scar and eye patch, enters the noisy school cafeteria. Holding her lunch tray tightly, she moves quietly, trying to avoid attention. Today, she feels a tiny spark of hope. Just a simple lunch and a quiet seat. She places her tray carefully on the table and sits down, but in seconds her body stiffens, coldness spreads through her skirt, her eyes widen in shock. The chair has been soaked deliberately. She realizes this was a setup. Laughter erupts. William, a flashy black teenage boy in trendy clothes, points at her and yells, "Big Amarachi peed herself!" His group of friends burst into laughter, clapping and mocking. Students from other tables turn, whispering, pointing, and giggling. Amarachi remains frozen in place. Her fingers grip the edge of the table, her face tight, her eye behind the patch hidden. But her pain is clear. Though humiliated, she doesn't cry, doesn't run. The cafeteria grows quiet, sensing something shift. Amarachi slowly stands. Mud-streaked, soaked, heartbroken but calm. She looks directly at William, her voice steady. "I may be wet, but at least I'm not drowning in arrogance like you." Gasps fill the room. William is stunned. Amarachi picks up her tray and walks out, with her head held high. That evening, after the mud incident, Amarachi couldn't go home. Humiliated and emotionally shattered, she sat behind the school building, hiding her face in her knees. Her uniform was still dirty. The laughter still echoed in her mind. Her chest felt heavy with silent pain. As the sun began to set, she heard a gentle voice ask, "Why are you crying, my child?" Through her tears, Amarachi looked up and saw Mrs. Ella, the elderly school cleaner known for her quiet wisdom. With silver hair and kind, time-worn eyes, Mrs. Ella listened as Amarachi explained everything. Without pity or judgment, she reached into her bag and handed Amarachi a small jar. "Rub this on your scar every night," she said softly. "And when someone insults you again, just say thank you. They will face the consequences." Confused but strangely comforted, Amarachi walked home, the strange herbal scent lingering on her fingers. That night she sat on her wooden bed, staring at the small jar under the moonlight. Was it magic? Was it foolishness? She didn't know, but with a quiet breath she opened it, rubbed a small amount over her scar and whispered, "Please, let this end." Then she tucked the jar under her pillow and drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, as expected, William hurled insults at her again in the school hallway, but this time Amarachi didn't shrink. She didn't run. She simply looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Thank you." Her voice was calm, her gaze unshaken. The entire hallway fell into stunned silence. No one laughed, not even William. Something in her presence had shifted. William froze, uncertain. His arrogance failed him. The students around them stood quietly, watching Amarachi as she walked past him, dignified, graceful, and fearless. What no one realized in that moment was that her simple response had triggered something unseen. A chain of events had begun, and none of them, not even Amarachi, could stop what was coming next. The day after Amarachi's bold response, William didn't show up to school. At first, it seemed like nothing unusual. Perhaps he was late or skipping, but by break time, whispers began circling, "Where's William?" followed by concern from students and teachers alike. His absence, unexpected and uncharacteristic, cast a shadow across the campus. By the second day, concern turned into confusion. The school sent a note to his house, still no word. On the third day, a staff member was sent to investigate. What they found stunned everyone. William was bedridden, his body frail, his lips dry and cracked, his once confident voice silenced. He couldn't eat, speak, or move. His parents were frantic. The boy who had ruled the school was now reduced to a helpless whisper of himself. Doctors were called, injections, vitamins, medications, but nothing worked. "This is beyond me," the town's best doctor admitted. William was then taken to the biggest church. Powerful prayers were shouted. Oil anointed his body, but he didn't stir. Next, they went to an Islamic cleric. Still nothing. Herbalists performed rituals by moonlight, no cure. The illness refused to leave. William remained trapped, silent, still, unresponsive. Hope gave way to despair. William's parents had spent their life savings searching for answers, but every attempt led nowhere. The boy's once proud family unraveled under financial and emotional pressure. The boy who had once mocked others now lay defenseless, and all paths to healing seemed to close, until fate stepped in. Through a chance encounter at a market, exhausted and broken, William's mother gave alms to a frail beggar woman, but the woman's grip was shockingly strong, her stare sharp and knowing. "Your son's illness is not natural," she whispered. "He offended someone powerful. Unless she forgives him, he will never be well." Shaken, William's mother finally understood. This wasn't a disease of the body. It was the consequence of deep, emotional harm. Justice demanded forgiveness. And the key now lay in the hands of the girl with the scar. William's mother couldn't sleep. The beggar woman's words haunted her. "He has offended someone powerful." That night, neither she nor William's father found rest. Their once proud son now lay helpless, and the only key to healing might be forgiveness. But from whom? William had bullied many, too many. But only one name echoed through their minds. Amarachi, the girl with the scar. The girl he had tormented the most. With fear and desperation clenching their hearts, William's parents made their way to Amarachi's house. Her father, the local mechanic, was under the hood of a car when they arrived. He looked up, surprised by the sight of them. William's mother immediately dropped to her knees, pleading, tears streaking her face. "Our son is dying. We were told only one person can forgive him, and the principal said it might be your daughter." Amarachi stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her heart pounding. These were the parents of the boy who had mocked her, shoved her, broken her spirit. Now they were begging her for help. Her father gently asked, "Will you forgive him?" A storm swirled inside her. Anger, sadness, power. For once she held the choice. The cure. "I didn't do anything to him," she said firmly. "I don't know what you're talking about," but her father stepped closer. "My child, even your worst enemy doesn't deserve to suffer like this." Amarachi heard the familiar kindness in his voice. She had grown up on that mercy. Slowly, she let it guide her. "I will forgive him," she said at last, "but only if he leaves the school and never bullies anyone again." William's parents agreed instantly. His mother added, "We'll also pay your school fees until you graduate." Amarachi took a deep breath. Then, with quiet power, she whispered the words that would change everything. That night, a quiet stillness settled over William's home. The air was heavy with hope and dread. His parents sat at his bedside, watching the rise and fall of his weak chest. His skin had turned pale, his eyes sunken, lips dry like cracked earth. All remedies had failed. Only one act remained. the forgiveness Amarachi had just offered. And then, just as dawn broke and the sky began to pale, something shifted. William's fingers twitched. His mother gasped. "William?" she whispered. His eyes fluttered open. "Mama." His voice was hoarse, barely a breath, but it was there. His father fell to his knees, overcome with emotion. "He's healed! My son is healed!" Within a day, William could sit up. The next, he could walk again. By the end of the week, it was as though he had never been sick. But something inside him had changed. His arrogance, his pride. It had vanished. He was quieter now, humbler, his gaze lowered, his words softer. William had faced the darkness, and he had come back different. His parents didn't hesitate. "You will never go back to that school," his father said firmly. "You will never raise your voice against another child. You've seen what cruelty can bring." William simply nodded. No defiance, no protest, only understanding. Meanwhile at school, whispers floated through the halls. Not about Amarachi's scar, but about her. The girl who had once been mocked was now seen through new eyes. Her strength, her calm, her quiet dignity had changed something in the air. No one laughed at her anymore. No one dared. She had become more than just the girl with a patch over her eye. She was a symbol, a lesson, a quiet storm that had turned the tables without ever lifting her voice. From then on, Amarachi walked the halls with her head high, not because the scar was gone, but because she had faced cruelty and responded not with hatred but with courage. She had spoken forgiveness into the face of pain and watched as it melted it away. And just like that, she became a legend in her small town, not for her looks, not for revenge, but for a grace far greater than anyone had expected from the girl with the scar. The next morning at school, William's seat was empty. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe he was late. But as break time arrived, whispers began to ripple through the hallways. "Where's William?" someone asked. "He never misses school," another replied. He was always the loudest, most present force on campus. By the second day, concern shifted into confusion. Teachers were now asking questions. On the third day, the principal called a staff meeting and sent someone to William's house. What they discovered would leave the school speechless. William was bedridden. His once vibrant body was now frail and weak. His lips were dry and cracked, his eyes dull, unfocused. He couldn't eat, speak, or even lift his head. The proud, untouchable boy had become a fragile shadow. His terrified parents rushed him to the best doctor in town. The doctor tried everything, medications, injections, vitamins, but nothing worked. "This is beyond me," he finally admitted, frustrated and confused. Desperate, the family sought spiritual help. They brought William to the city's largest church. The pastor anointed him, prayed over him, shouted to the heavens. But William remained still. "This is beyond me," the pastor sighed. They turned to a respected Islamic cleric, who recited verses, tied protective charms to the boy's wrist, and encouraged charity. His family gave food, money, and clothing, but nothing changed. William was unresponsive, his silence deeper than illness. As hope continued to slip through their fingers, someone mentioned a renowned herbalist deep in a remote village. Clinging to one last shred of faith, the parents traveled for hours. The herbalist, an elderly man with sharp eyes and graying hair, tried bitter herbs, mysterious potions, even moonlit bathing rituals. Still, the sickness lingered. Finally, he too whispered, "This is beyond me." Every method had failed, medical, spiritual, traditional. William's parents were left broken and out of answers. The once proud boy who mocked others now lay silent, swallowed by an unknown force. And somewhere in that same town, the girl with the eye patch, Amarachi, remained silent too. Not with anger, but with something far more powerful: dignity. Defeated and weary, William's parents returned home. His mother cried endlessly. His father sat in a daze, unable to comprehend the cruel turn of fate. Days passed in a blur of grief and desperation. They had tried everything: medicine, prayers, charms, but nothing could bring their son back from the darkness. And with each passing moment, hope slipped further from their fingers. One day, as the sun cast long shadows and the air thickened with tension, William's mother went to the market. Her body moved on instinct. eyes hollow, steps heavy. She picked up roots and bitter herbs, grasping at remnants of hope. That's when she saw her. An old woman, thin and frail, dressed in rags, sat quietly on the ground with an outstretched hand. "Please, just a little food," she whispered. Without hesitation, William's mother reached into her purse and offered money. But as she turned to leave, the beggar woman grabbed her wrist, tight, unnaturally strong. Their eyes locked. "Your son's illness is not natural," the old woman said. A chill rippled through her. "He has offended a very powerful girl. Unless she forgives him, he will never be well." When the mother blinked again, the woman had vanished. Panicked, she ran home and told her husband everything. He stood in silence, his thoughts racing. "Our son has bullied many," he admitted. "Too many. But who? Who had he hurt so deeply that even fate itself would turn away?" The answer lay somewhere in the past, buried beneath cruelty and arrogance. Without wasting another moment, William's father rushed to the school and demanded to see the principal. "Please," he pleaded, "our son is sick. They told us he offended someone. Do you know who it is?" The principal leaned back, removed his glasses and sighed deeply. "There is one," he said. "One he tormented more than anyone else. Amarachi, the girl with the scar." Without wasting another second, William's parents set off for Amarachi's house. The roughness of the road beneath them unnoticed as fear tightened around their chests like a vice, for their son, once untouchable, was slipping through their fingers, and now they carried a name: the girl with the scar. The girl their son had mocked, broken, humiliated again and again, and yet, now, she might be the only one who could save him. They arrived at the humble home just as Amarachi's father was bent under the hood of a car, his hands slick with grease and his eyes heavy with fatigue, and when he saw them approach, especially in such a disheveled and desperate state, he was taken aback, and before he could speak, William's mother dropped to her knees, her voice breaking as she pleaded, "Please, sir, our son is dying. The principal told us it may be your daughter he wronged." The mechanic said nothing at first, only wiped his hands slowly with a rag, and with emotion tightening the corners of his face, he called for Amarachi, who stepped into the doorway with her arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes wary and her heart pounding at the sight of the parents of the boy who had tormented her soul. "And yet," her father's voice, gentle as a breeze, asked the question that froze time, "My child, will you forgive him?" Amarachi stood still, her memories crashing over her like waves, every cruel word, every shove, every humiliating laugh. But in her father's voice she heard not judgment, not pressure, but a quiet echo of the lessons he'd taught her whole life, that even one's greatest enemy doesn't deserve to suffer without end. And though her voice was guarded and her heart ached, she finally said, "I didn't do anything to him. I don't know what you're talking about." But inside she was already beginning to understand the power of mercy. Then, after a breathless silence, she spoke again with resolve, "I will forgive him, but only if he leaves the school and never bullies anyone again." And the parents nodded quickly, William's mother adding through tears, "We'll pay for your education, Amarachi, until you finish university." And with one last deep breath, Amarachi closed her eyes, let go of the weight that had sat on her for years, and whispered the words that carried more power than anyone could have imagined. "I forgive you, William." That night something shifted. As dawn broke, a soft light touched the world and, in William's room, the impossible happened. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened. "Mama," he whispered, voice cracked but audible. His mother screamed with joy. His father rushed to the bedside, overwhelmed with relief. By the second day, William could sit. By the third, he walked. By the fourth, it was as if he had never been sick. But something inside him had changed. He had tasted suffering. He had lived through humiliation. He had known helplessness. His parents pulled him out of school. "You will never hurt anyone again," his father said firmly. William didn't argue. He had no more cruelty left in him. Back at school, something had changed too. The whispers weren't about Amarachi's scar anymore. They were about her power, her dignity, her calm strength. The girl who was once mocked now walked with quiet grace. She was no longer just the girl with the eye patch. She was Amarachi, the girl who had turned pain into power, cruelty into compassion, and in the whole town, no one dared laugh at her again.